Robert Chin had spent 15 years cleaning the corridors of the Galactic Institute of Advanced Studies. The institute was a massive structure that orbited around the star Centauri 7, and it was considered the most prestigious academy in the entire galaxy. Robert worked as a janitor, mopping floors, cleaning windows, and emptying trash bins in the endless hallways. Nobody really paid attention to him. The scientists, engineers, and mathematicians from different alien species walked past him every single day without even looking at him. The Vextral scientists had crystalline minds that could think in ways humans could not understand. They could process information at incredible speeds and solve problems that seemed impossible. The Zeph engineers were beings made of pure energy, and they could build machines that defied the laws of physics. The Krell mathematicians had lived for thousands of years, and they had accumulated knowledge from centuries of study and research. All of these beings were far more intelligent than any human, or so everyone believed. Robert was just a human. Nobody expected anything special from him. He was quiet and kept to himself. He did his job well, showing up on time and leaving when his shift ended. He did not talk much to the other workers, and he did not try to make friends with the alien scientists. He simply cleaned the institute, day after day, year after year. Most people forgot he was even there. But Robert had a secret. His IQ was over 500. He had an extraordinary mind that could understand the most complex mathematical problems and scientific theories. As a child, Robert had been tested and found to be a genius, but his family was poor. They could not afford to send him to the best schools or universities. Instead of becoming a famous scientist, Robert had ended up working as a janitor to support himself and his aging mother back on Earth. He had accepted this life and stopped dreaming about being something more. It was easier that way. It was safer to be invisible. Every evening, as Robert cleaned the laboratories and offices of the institute, he would glance at the research papers and equations written on white boards and scattered across desks. He could understand them all. His mind would automatically process the information, solving problems without him even trying. But he never said anything. He never told anyone about his abilities. He simply cleaned and left. This had been his life for 15 years. Nothing ever changed. Nothing ever disturbed his quiet routine. But one evening everything changed. It was a Tuesday night when Robert was cleaning the offices on the top floor of the institute. The building was almost empty. Most of the scientists had gone home for the day. Only a few security guards and maintenance workers remained. Robert was pushing his cleaning cart down the corridor when he heard voices coming from one of the offices. The door was slightly open and Robert could hear 3 people arguing inside. He recognized the voices. They belonged to 3 senior professors of the institute. The first voice belonged to Professor Victoria Veltaris, a Vextral scientist with a cold, sharp way of speaking. She was known for being very proud of her intelligence and achievements. The second voice belonged to Professor Krell 999, a Krell mathematician who had studied at the institute for over 200 years. The third voice belonged to Dr. Zeph 7, a Zeph engineer who rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone listened. Robert paused his cleaning and listened to their conversation. They were arguing about something called the Caliph conjecture. Robert had heard about it before. It was a famous unsolved equation that had stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy for 200 years. Many scientists had tried to solve it, but nobody had succeeded. The equation was so complex and so difficult that most people believed it was impossible to solve. It was considered one of the greatest mysteries in all of science. "We should try again," said Professor Victoria Veltaris. "The Galactic Council has offered a huge reward for anyone who can solve the Caliph conjecture. We have the best minds in the galaxy. If we work together, we might finally be able to solve it." "It is impossible," said Professor Krell 999. "I have studied this equation for over 100 years. I have tried every method I know. The equation is beyond our understanding. No species in the galaxy has the intelligence to solve it." "That is not true," said Dr. Zeph 7. "There must be a way. There is always a way. We just have not found it yet." Robert stood very still, listening to their words. He could picture the equation in his mind. He had seen it before in research papers. As he listened to the 3 professors argue, he began thinking about the equation. His mind started working on it automatically. He did not try to solve it. It just happened. His brain was processing the information, examining the problem from every angle, looking for patterns and connections. Within just a few seconds, Robert understood it. He could see the solution clearly in his mind. Not just the answer, but the beautiful logic behind it. He could see how to prove it. He could see multiple ways to solve it. The equation was actually quite elegant once you understood its true nature. The complexity had been hiding the simplicity underneath. Robert felt his heart beating faster. He knew that this was important. He knew that what he had just discovered was incredible. But he also knew that if he revealed his ability, everything would change. His quiet, simple life would be over. People would want to use him. Scientists would want to study him. He would no longer be invisible. He would no longer be free. Robert quietly finished his work and left the building. He went home to his small apartment and sat on his bed, thinking about what he had heard and what he had discovered. He thought about the three professors and their argument. He thought about the reward that the Galactic Council had offered. He thought about his secret. For the first time in 15 years, Robert Chin wondered if maybe it was time to let someone know the truth about who he really was. 1 week after hearing the professors arguing about the Caliph conjecture, Robert learned that the Galactic Institute had announced a grand symposium. This was a huge event. Scientists and mathematicians from all across the galaxy were invited to come and present their work on the unsolvable equation. The Galactic Council had decided to offer a massive reward to anyone who could finally solve it. The amount of money and resources offered was more than Robert could ever imagine. But money was not what interested Robert. What interested him was the challenge itself and the chance to see if his understanding of the equation was correct. The Institute was preparing for the symposium with great excitement. Workers were decorating the main auditorium. Scientists were arriving from distant planets and star systems. The atmosphere in the building was tense and competitive. Everyone wanted to be the one to solve the Caliph conjecture. Everyone believed that this was their chance to become famous and important in the galaxy. Professor Victoria Veltaris held a press conference to announce her plans. She was confident and proud. She told reporters that only beings with truly superior intellect could even understand the basic framework of the Caliph conjecture. She said that lower species, especially humans, would never be able to comprehend something so complex and difficult. Her words were published in galactic news systems everywhere. Many people agreed with her. After all, humans had never accomplished anything remarkable in the scientific world. Humans were known for being ordinary and unremarkable. Robert heard about Professor Veltaris's comments while he was working. Other workers were talking about it in the break room. Some of them agreed with her. Some of them said that humans were not smart enough to do great things. Robert said nothing. He simply listened and continued with his work. This was what he was used to. Being invisible. Being forgotten. Being underestimated. That evening, Robert was assigned to clean the offices on the top floor where the senior professors worked. He was pushing his cart down the long corridor when he noticed that Professor Victoria Veltaris's office door was open. Usually her door was locked. Robert glanced inside as he passed. The office was empty, but he could see a research pad sitting on her desk. The screen was still glowing. Someone had left it on. Robert knew he should not look at other people's work. It was not his job. It was not his business. But something inside him made him pause. He looked around to make sure nobody was watching. The corridor was empty. He quietly pushed his cart into the office and approached the desk. He looked at the research pad. On the screen he could see the complete Caliph conjecture written out in full mathematical notation. All of the equations. All of the problems. All of the complexity. Robert's eyes moved across the screen, reading and understanding everything instantly. He did not need to think about it. His mind simply absorbed the information and began working on it. Robert knew he should leave immediately. But he could not move. He stood there, staring at the equation, and his brilliant mind began processing it. He began to see patterns. He began to understand the structure. He began to see solutions forming in his mind like crystals growing in a solution. His heart was beating fast. He could feel excitement building inside him. This was what his mind was built for. This was what he was meant to do. After several minutes, Robert forced himself to look away. He needed to be careful. He needed to be smart about this. He took out his personal data device, a simple device that all workers carried. Quickly and carefully he photographed the research pad screen with his device. Then he put the device back in his pocket and left the office. He continued his cleaning work, trying to act normal, trying to pretend that nothing had happened. That night, Robert went home and sat in his small apartment. He took out his data device and looked at the photograph of the equation. Then he made tea and sat down at his table with paper and a pen. He began to work. His mind moved through the problem like water flowing downhill. The solutions came naturally to him. He did not struggle. He did not have to think hard. The answers simply appeared. 3 hours passed like minutes. Robert did not notice the time going by. He was completely focused on the work. His hand wrote down equations and proofs. He wrote out 4 different ways to solve the Caliph conjecture. He showed how the equation actually contained a beautiful hidden symmetry that nobody had noticed before. He showed how understanding this symmetry could unlock entirely new areas of mathematics that had never been explored before. The implications were enormous. This discovery would change science forever. When Robert finished, it was late at night. He sat back in his chair and looked at all the pages he had written. Every proof was correct. Every solution was elegant and simple. He had done it. He had solved the Caliph conjecture. But now Robert faced a choice. A terrible, difficult choice. He could keep this discovery secret. He could throw away the papers and pretend that nothing had happened. He could go back to his quiet life, invisible and forgotten. Nobody would ever know what he had done. Nobody would ever know that he was capable of such great things. Or he could reveal his discovery. He could tell the world that he had solved the Caliph conjecture. But if he did that, everything would change. His peaceful life would be destroyed. People would stare at him. Scientists would want to study him. Other humans would hate him because he would prove that humans could be intelligent. The aliens would hate him because he would threaten their belief that they were superior. His life would never be simple or quiet again. Robert sat in his apartment through the night, holding the papers in his hands, thinking about what to do. The pages contained the most important work of his life. But they also contained the end of his life as he knew it. Robert had to make a decision. And whatever he decided would change everything forever. The day of the grand symposium arrived. The main auditorium of the Galactic Institute was filled with the most brilliant minds in the entire galaxy. Scientists and mathematicians from hundreds of different planets and star systems sat in the seats. There were Vex Thrall with their crystal-like bodies, Zeph beings made of pure energy, Krell mathematicians with their ancient knowledge, and many other alien species that Robert had never even seen before. The air in the auditorium was thick with tension and excitement. Everyone wanted to see who would finally solve the Caliph conjecture. Robert was there too, but nobody noticed him. He was assigned to work as a maintenance man for the event. His job was to keep the auditorium clean and make sure everything was in order. He wore his gray uniform with his name tag. He pushed a cleaning cart through the corridors and worked quietly in the background. Nobody paid any attention to him. The scientists and important people did not even see him as he moved through the halls. He was just another worker. Just another invisible person. The symposium lasted for 3 days. Each day, different scientists presented their theories and attempts to solve the Caliph conjecture. Each presentation was complex and difficult to understand. Each presenter spoke with confidence about their work. But none of them had actually solved the equation. None of them had found the answer. They had only theories and partial solutions. They had only ideas and guesses. But no real solutions. Robert watched from the back of the auditorium as he worked. He watched Professor Victoria Veltaris give a long presentation about her research. She spoke for 2 hours, explaining her mathematical approach to the problem. She showed complex diagrams and equations on large screens. She spoke with absolute confidence. She told the audience that she was very close to solving it. She said that with more time and more resources she would definitely find the answer. The audience applauded politely, but Robert could see the disappointment in their faces. They knew that she had not actually solved it. Other professors gave presentations too. Professor Krell 999 spoke about his century-long research into the problem. He showed all the different methods he had tried. He explained why each method had failed. Dr. Zeph 7 presented a new computational approach that used quantum computing in a way that had never been done before. But even with all his advanced technology, he could not solve the equation. None of them could do it. The presentations continued throughout the day. The audience grew more and more frustrated. They had come to see the Caliph conjecture solved. They had come to witness history. But instead, they were listening to scientists explain why they had failed. The tension in the auditorium became almost unbearable. People started whispering to each other. Some people looked disappointed. Others looked angry that they had wasted their time. Then, during the afternoon break on the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. Robert was in the auditorium, cleaning the floor and emptying trash bins. He was working quietly near the front of the room. He could hear some of the scientists talking to each other. They were discussing the presentations. They were saying that nobody seemed to have any real solution. They were saying that perhaps the Caliph conjecture was truly unsolvable. Perhaps no being in the galaxy, no matter how intelligent, could solve this equation. Robert listened to them talking. He thought about the papers he had hidden in his apartment. He thought about the solution he had discovered. He thought about his 4 different proofs. He thought about everything he understood about the equation. And suddenly he made a decision. A decision that would change his entire life. He put down his cleaning supplies and his trash bag. He left his cleaning cart where it was. He walked slowly toward the presentation dais at the front of the auditorium. Several scientists noticed him. They wondered who this strange man in a gray uniform was. A security guard started to approach him, ready to ask what he was doing. Robert walked up to the microphone. His heart was beating very fast. His hands were shaking. But his mind was clear and calm. He looked out at the thousands of scientists and mathematicians sitting in the auditorium. He looked at Professor Victoria Veltaris, who was standing to the side of the stage. She was looking at him with confusion and anger on her face. Robert took a deep breath. Then he began to speak in a calm, quiet voice. He introduced himself. He told them that he was Robert Chin, a janitor who worked at the institute. He could see shock and confusion on their faces. Some people laughed. Some people looked angry. A security guard moved forward to remove him from the stage. But then Robert began to speak about the Caliph conjecture. He began to explain what it really was. He explained how the complexity of the equation had hidden its true nature from everyone who had studied it. He explained how the equation actually contained a beautiful symmetry that made it much simpler than everyone thought. He spoke with complete confidence and complete knowledge. His words were clear and precise. His understanding was perfect. He pulled out papers from his pocket. He began to explain his first proof. He spoke slowly and carefully, making sure everyone could understand. He showed how the equation could be solved through a method that nobody had thought of before. He wrote equations on a board as he spoke. The audience sat completely silent. They were listening to every word. Robert then explained his second proof. Then his third. Then his fourth. Each proof was different. Each proof showed a different way to solve the same equation. Each proof was elegant and beautiful. The mathematics was perfect. There were no mistakes. Everything he said was absolutely correct. When Robert finished speaking, it took a moment before anyone moved or spoke. The entire auditorium was completely silent. The scientists and mathematicians did not know what to say. They had just heard a janitor solve an equation that had been unsolvable for 200 years. They had just witnessed something that seemed impossible. A human had accomplished what no other species in the galaxy had been able to do. Then the auditorium erupted in chaos. People started shouting. People started arguing. Some people were amazed. Some people were angry. Security moved forward to grab Robert. But Professor Victoria Veltaris raised her hand and shouted at the security to stop. She looked at Robert with a strange expression on her face. It was a mixture of shock, respect, and anger all at the same time. The symposium had changed. Everything had changed. Robert Chin was no longer invisible. Robert Chin was no longer forgotten. Robert Chin had revealed his secret to the entire galaxy, and now nothing would ever be the same again. The moment Robert finished his presentation, chaos erupted in the auditorium. Scientists stood up from their seats and started shouting. Some were shouting questions at Robert. Some were arguing with each other. Some were trying to understand what had just happened. Security guards surrounded the stage, unsure whether to remove Robert or protect him. The noise was so loud that nobody could hear what anyone else was saying. Professor Victoria Veltaris pushed through the crowd and climbed onto the stage. Her face was red with anger. She looked directly at Robert and demanded to know where he had gotten the information. She accused him of stealing her research and copying her work. She said that there was no way a human janitor could have solved something so complex. She claimed that Robert must have used a computer or accessed the Institute's forbidden databases. She said that he had cheated and that his solution was not legitimate. Other scientists began to support her accusations. They said that humans were not intelligent enough to solve such a difficult equation. They said that Robert must have somehow stolen the answer from someone else. They said that he could not possibly understand the mathematics he had presented. The accusations spread quickly through the crowd. Soon, many scientists were claiming that Robert was a fraud and a thief. But not everyone agreed. Some scientists had listened carefully to Robert's presentation. They had checked his mathematics. They had verified his proofs. These scientists knew that what Robert had presented was correct. They knew that his understanding was genuine. They knew that he had not stolen anything. They stood up and defended Robert. They said that his solution was elegant and original. They said that the proofs were perfect. They said that Robert had accomplished something remarkable. The Galactic Council, which was watching the symposium from a special viewing room, immediately ordered an investigation. Security took Robert away from the auditorium. They took him to a secure facility for questioning and testing. Robert was placed in a small, white room with bright lights. Scientists and security officers came in and asked him many questions. Where did he learn mathematics? How did he study? What methods did he use to solve the equation? They wanted to know everything about him. Then they gave Robert more tests. They gave him other difficult equations to solve. They gave him complex mathematical problems. They asked him to explain his thinking as he worked through the problems. Robert solved every single one. He solved them quickly and correctly. Every time his thinking was logical and clear. Every time his answers were absolutely perfect. There were no mistakes. The tests continued for many hours. The scientists became more and more amazed as Robert solved problem after problem. It was clear that he was genuinely intelligent. It was clear that his ability was real. It was not fake. It was not stolen. It was his own natural ability. His intelligence was genuine. The Galactic Council made a formal announcement. They confirmed that Robert Chin had indeed solved the Caliph conjecture. They confirmed that his solution was correct and original. They confirmed that he had not cheated or stolen anything. His intelligence was verified and certified. Robert Chin was officially recognized as the person who had solved the unsolvable equation. But the situation became very complicated. Different groups had different reactions to the news. Some species welcomed Robert as a hero. They said that humans deserved respect. They said that humans had been underestimated for too long. They said that Robert had proven that humans could be just as intelligent as any other species in the galaxy. These groups wanted to celebrate Robert and treat him as a great scientist. Other species reacted with suspicion and fear. They had always believed that humans were inferior to other species. They had always believed that other species were more intelligent and more advanced. Robert's achievement challenged this belief. It made them uncomfortable. Some of them began to worry that if humans could be so intelligent, then perhaps humans posed a threat to the established order of the galaxy. These groups began to make accusations and spread rumors about Robert. They said that his intelligence was unnatural. They said that humans had somehow cheated or used forbidden technology. News of Robert's achievement spread across the entire galaxy. Humans on Earth learned that one of their own had solved a problem that had stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy for 200 years. Humans became proud. They celebrated Robert's achievement. They said that humans deserved to be respected. They said that humans should be given more opportunities to study science and mathematics. But other humans reacted with jealousy. Some humans said that Robert was a threat to human society. They said that if he revealed his intelligence to the galaxy, then all humans would be seen as dangerous. Some humans wanted Robert to keep his intelligence secret. Some humans wanted him to downplay his achievement. Some humans wanted him to return to his job as a janitor and pretend that nothing had happened. The Galactic Council offered Robert a choice. They could give him a position as a senior scientist at the Institute. They could give him resources and funding to conduct his own research. They could make him famous and respected throughout the galaxy. They could give him power and influence. But this would mean leaving his old life behind completely. It would mean being studied and scrutinized constantly. It would mean living under pressure and expectation. It would mean becoming a symbol, and a symbol can never be free. Robert spent days thinking about what to do. He received offers from universities across the galaxy. He received messages from other humans asking him to be their representative. He received messages from scientists asking him to work with them. Everyone wanted something from him. Everyone wanted to use him. Everyone wanted to benefit from his intelligence. Robert felt trapped. He had revealed his secret, and now he could never go back to being invisible. He could never return to his quiet life as a janitor. His life had been completely changed by his decision to reveal the truth about himself. He had solved the Caliph conjecture, and now he had to figure out what came next. He had to decide who he wanted to become and what he wanted to do with his life. The entire galaxy was waiting to see what Robert Chin would do next. Robert Chin sat in a quiet room at the Galactic Institute. Representatives from the council were waiting outside the door. They were ready to offer him any position he wanted. They were ready to give him any resource he asked for. They were ready to make him one of the most important scientists in the galaxy. But Robert did not want any of those things. He had spent the entire night thinking about what he really wanted to do with his life and his intelligence. Robert had realized something important while he was being tested and questioned. He had realized that the problem was not just about solving one difficult equation. The real problem was bigger than that. The real problem was that the galaxy had a system where only certain beings from certain species were allowed to become scientists and mathematicians. The system only looked for talent in the right places. The system only gave opportunities to beings who came from rich families or prestigious universities. The system ignored talent that existed in unexpected places. The system was broken. Robert thought about his own life. He had been a genius his entire life, but nobody had ever given him a chance to use his intelligence. He had worked as a janitor for 15 years because he was poor and human. He had been invisible and forgotten. But he was not the only one like this. There were probably thousands of other beings in the galaxy who had extraordinary intelligence but who had never been given opportunities to develop their talents. There were probably thousands of other beings cleaning floors and doing simple jobs when they could have been solving the most difficult problems in science. Robert made a decision. He asked to speak with the leaders of the Galactic Council. When they came to see him, Robert made a proposal. He said that instead of accepting a position as a senior scientist, he wanted to start something new. He wanted to create a new institute. An institute dedicated to finding intelligent beings who had been overlooked by the system. An institute that would search for talent in places where nobody else was looking. An institute that would give opportunities to beings who did not have rich families or prestigious backgrounds. He called it the Institute for Unconventional Problem Solving. The purpose of this new institute would be to identify brilliant minds that existed outside the normal system. It would search among workers and laborers and ordinary beings. It would look for talent in poor communities and forgotten places. It would give scholarships and training to beings who had never had the chance to develop their abilities. It would prove that intelligence existed everywhere in the galaxy, not just in the places where people expected to find it. The Galactic Council listened to Robert's proposal. At first, some of them thought he was crazy. They said that searching for talent among janitors and laborers was a waste of time. They said that most ordinary beings did not have extraordinary intelligence. They said that the system was already working well. But Robert explained his thinking carefully. He showed them that the current system was missing many brilliant minds. He showed them that intelligence did not come from species or family background or wealth. Intelligence came from nature, and nature distributed it randomly among all beings. Some members of the council were convinced by Robert's argument. They decided to give him a chance. They decided to fund his new institute. They gave him resources and buildings. They gave him authority to hire teachers and researchers. They gave him the power to search the galaxy for overlooked talent. Robert began his work immediately. He sent teams across the galaxy to search for intelligent beings who had been missed by the traditional system. His teams looked everywhere. They looked in small mining colonies. They looked in agricultural communities. They looked among workers and servants and ordinary beings. They gave tests and assessments to anyone who was interested. They looked for signs of extraordinary intelligence. They found many talented beings. They found a ZEF worker who had never received any formal education but who had a natural understanding of quantum physics. They found a young Krell who had been working in a factory but who had extraordinary abilities in engineering and design. They found a human female named Emma who had been working as a cleaner on a space station but who had a brilliant mind for solving complex problems. They found beings from species that had never produced scientists before. They found talent everywhere they looked. The new institute grew quickly. Robert hired the best teachers and researchers. He created programs specifically designed to help these overlooked beings develop their talents. He taught them how to think scientifically. He taught them how to solve difficult problems. He taught them how to communicate their ideas to other scientists. Many of the beings who came to the institute had never had the chance to go to school. They had never had teachers who believed in them. Now they finally had the chance to become what they had always been capable of becoming. The work was difficult but rewarding. Robert spent his days teaching and mentoring students. He spent his time reviewing their work and giving them guidance. He worked with his team to create new methods for identifying talent. He worked with the Galactic Council to expand the program. Slowly, the institute grew into something important and meaningful. Professor Victoria Veltaris visited Robert's institute one day. She walked through the classrooms and laboratories. She watched Robert teaching a group of students from different species. She watched him explain a difficult mathematical concept in simple language so that everyone could understand. She saw the excitement and hope in the faces of the students. She saw beings who had never had opportunities before, now becoming scientists and thinkers. She approached Robert after his class ended. Victoria admitted that she had been wrong about Robert. She said that she had not believed that a human could be intelligent. She said that his achievement had changed her thinking. She said that his institute was important and necessary. She asked if she could help. Robert welcomed her support. Together they worked to expand the program and reach more overlooked beings. Years passed. The Institute for Unconventional Problem Solving became famous throughout the galaxy. It discovered many brilliant minds. It trained thousands of beings from all species and all backgrounds. It produced scientists and mathematicians who made important discoveries. It changed the way the galaxy thought about intelligence and talent. It proved that brilliance did not come from species or wealth or family background. Brilliance came from nature, and it could be found anywhere if you looked carefully enough. Robert never became a famous scientist who solved difficult equations. But he became something more important. He became a person who changed the galaxy's understanding of intelligence and potential. He became a person who gave hope to beings who had been overlooked and forgotten. He proved that sometimes the greatest achievements do not come from solving one difficult problem. Sometimes they come from changing the system itself and giving everyone a chance to use their talents and abilities. The universe had learned an important lesson from Robert Chin. The greatest discoveries do not always come from looking up at the stars. Sometimes they come from looking closer at those beside you. Sometimes they come from noticing the quiet, invisible people who had been forgotten. Sometimes they come from giving everyone a chance to show what they are truly capable of becoming.